They may have written timeless hits and sold out stadiums, but behind the spotlight, some country stars revealed a darker side. In this video, we're diving into 12 of the worst jerks in country music history. Artists who let arrogance, cruelty, and ego overshadow their talent. From disrespecting fans to humiliating fellow musicians, these names will leave you shocked. You might have once loved their songs, but after learning the truth, you'll regret ever cheering for them. 1. Toby Keith. Toby Keith built his career on patriotic anthems, rowdy barroom hits, and a larger-than-life persona that made him one of the most recognizable names in modern country music. Songs like Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue and Beer for My Horses turned him into both a beloved and controversial figure, with fans seeing him as a fearless defender of American pride. On stage, he was loud, confident, and charismatic. But away from the music, Toby's behavior often painted him as one of the most arrogant figures in Nashville. Keith's reputation as a jerk wasn't simply built on his brash public image. Throughout his career, he earned headlines for belittling fellow artists, picking unnecessary fights, and openly insulting critics. One of the most infamous examples came from his long-standing feud with the Dixie Chicks. After Natalie Maines criticized his song and political stance, Toby responded with relentless attacks, using his shows, interviews, and even crude visuals to mock her. Instead of letting his music speak, Keith often chose confrontation, creating an atmosphere of hostility that divided country fans. But it wasn't only celebrities who faced his temper. Fans frequently reported that Keith could be dismissive and rude during meet and greets, treating supporters more like inconveniences than the backbone of his career. Journalists, too, described him as combative in interviews, quick to snap when questioned about his controversies or challenged on his opinions. What was once seen as outspoken honesty began to look more like unchecked arrogance. Over time, this pattern chipped away at his public image. While many loyal fans continued to celebrate his music, others grew tired of the ego and disrespect. For some, Toby Keith came to represent everything negative about Nashville's superstar culture. Power without humility, fame without gratitude. His reputation as a talented yet abrasive figure has stuck, overshadowing much of the positive impact his songs once had. In the end, Toby Keith's legacy is complicated. His hits remain staples of the country genre, but his behavior has left a permanent stain. For many, the memory of his arrogance is impossible to separate from his music. He might have stood tall as a country icon, but his attitude cemented his place on the list of the worst jerks in country music history. 2. Blake Shelton. Blake Shelton's rise from a small-town Oklahoma singer to one of country music's biggest stars should have been a fairy tale story. With chart-topping hits like Austin, Honey Bee, and God Gave Me You, he quickly became a household name. His role as a longtime coach on The Voice only amplified his fame, presenting him as the witty, charming country boy America loved. But behind that television-friendly grin, many fans and insiders saw a different side of Shelton, a man whose arrogance and cutting humor often crossed the line into cruelty. Shelton's tendency to treat fans poorly has been noted in countless stories. Concertgoers have recalled moments when he openly mocked fans from the stage, dismissing their requests or belittling their enthusiasm. Instead of gratitude, audiences sometimes got sarcasm or even insults. His online presence hasn't helped either. On Twitter, Blake developed a reputation for sharp, sometimes nasty remarks. What some defenders called playful often came across as rude, dismissive, and downright mean-spirited, especially when directed at ordinary fans who once idolized him. Industry insiders also described Shelton as difficult to work with. Behind the cameras of The Voice, reports surfaced that his humor often turned cruel, especially toward those who didn't fall in line with his way of thinking. Fellow musicians and journalists have commented on his inflated ego, noting that his stardom only seemed to magnify his dismissive attitude toward others. Instead of being a supportive voice in the industry, Shelton has too often leaned into the role of the arrogant superstar. Even in his personal life, his messy public divorce from Miranda Lambert left fans divided. Rumors swirled about infidelity and toxic behavior, further fueling the image of a man who treated relationships with the same carelessness he sometimes showed his supporters. While no one can deny his talent or his string of hits, many longtime listeners began questioning whether they could still cheer for a star who seemed so comfortable treating others poorly. Today, Blake Shelton remains a powerful figure in country music, but his reputation is tainted. For every fan who laughs at his jokes, another remembers the sting of his insults. For every viewer who praises his charm, others recall the arrogance that often leaks through the cracks. And that duality, an artist adored for his music, yet criticized for his attitude, firmly places Blake Shelton on the list of country's worst jerks. 3. Hank Williams Jr. Hank Williams Jr. inherited more than just the name of his legendary father. He carried the weight of country music royalty. With a career that spanned decades and hits like Family Tradition and A Country Boy Can Survive, he built his own empire and cultivated a rebellious image that made him a staple of Southern culture. Yet while his music connected with millions, Hank Jr.'s attitude, fueled by arrogance and controversy, earned him a reputation as one of country music's biggest jerks. Hank's abrasive personality was no secret. Known for his hot temper, he often lashed out at journalists, critics, and even fans. He cultivated a persona of the unfiltered outlaw, but many argue he crossed the line from bold honesty into plain cruelty. At concerts, he was infamous for drunken rants, slurred insults, and aggressive behavior that left audiences stunned. What should have been unforgettable nights of music sometimes turned into spectacles of arrogance and hostility. One of the most notorious moments in Hank's career came in 2011 when he compared President Obama to Adolf Hitler during a televised interview. The backlash was swift and severe, leading ESPN to cut ties with him and remove his iconic Monday Night Football theme. Instead of apologizing and moving forward, Hank doubled down, releasing a defiant song attacking his critics. Rather than showing humility, he seemed to revel in the chaos he caused, alienating fans and reinforcing his image as someone who simply didn't care about respect or accountability. But his arrogance wasn't limited to politics. Fellow artists have described him as dismissive and condescending, often treating collaborators as though they were beneath him. His larger-than-life ego, combined with a refusal to adapt or listen, made him one of Nashville's most polarizing figures. While his fans loved the outlaw attitude, others saw only a bitter man who hid behind his family name and a reputation for controversy. Despite all this, Hank Williams Jr. remains a celebrated figure in the genre, with a loyal base that excuses his behavior as part of his outlaw charm. But for many, his arrogance, outbursts, and consistent disregard for others make him less of a rebel and more of a bully. In the history of country music, Hank Jr. stands not only as a famous son of a legend, but also as one of the worst jerks the genre has ever known. 4. Kenny Chesney. On the surface, Kenny Chesney seems like the picture of laid-back country stardom. With his beach-themed anthems like No Shoes, No Shirt, No Problems, and When the Sun Goes Down, he crafted a persona of carefree living that resonated with millions. He sold out stadiums, won countless awards, and built one of the most loyal fan bases in the genre. Yet behind the island cowboy image, stories of arrogance and dismissive behavior reveal a different Kenny, one many fans and insiders quietly describe as one of Nashville's worst jerks. Part of Chesney's reputation comes from his treatment of fans. While he's beloved on stage, many who've interacted with him off stage report a cold and distant personality. Some fans have shared experiences of being brushed off at meet and greets, where Kenny reportedly avoided eye contact, rushed through autographs, and made people feel like they were wasting his time. For an artist whose career was built on devoted followers, such dismissiveness painted him as ungrateful. Then there was his brief and very public marriage to actress Renee Zellweger. When it ended after only 4 months, the annulment cited fraud, sparking endless rumors about Chesney's personal life. Instead of handling the situation with grace, Chesney reacted defensively, mocking the speculation and attacking the media for daring to question him. His refusal to show humility only fueled the impression of an arrogant star, more concerned with image than truth. Chesney's clashes with the press also added to the picture. Reporters have noted his hostility when faced with tough questions, describing him as impatient, irritable, and unwilling to engage. His carefully curated public persona of the relaxed, beach-loving superstar seemed to crumble whenever he was forced outside of scripted appearances. Perhaps the most telling detail is how fellow artists view him. Some in Nashville quietly admit that Chesney can be difficult, aloof, and dismissive toward peers who don't match his superstar status. His dominance of country radio and touring made him a powerhouse, but that power often seemed to come with an inflated ego. Kenny Chesney may still pack stadiums and sell millions of records, but the stories that follow him tell a different tale. For many fans, it's hard to reconcile the warm, easygoing music with the arrogance and dismissiveness that define his offstage reputation. Behind the sunglasses and beach ball anthems, Chesney has earned his place on the list of country's worst jerks. Leann Rimes. Leann Rimes entered country music as a prodigy. At just 13 years old, her breakout hit Blue stunned audiences and critics alike, drawing comparisons to Patsy Cline and establishing her as one of the most promising voices of her generation. By the late 90s, she was a superstar, crossing over into pop and becoming a household name. But as her career progressed, Rimes' personal scandals and abrasive behavior reshaped her image. From a child prodigy to a star, many came to see as one of the genre's most unlikable figures. Much of Leann's tarnished reputation stems from her notorious affair with actor Eddie Cibrian. At the time, both she and Cibrian were married, and the relationship became a tabloid firestorm. While celebrity affairs are nothing new, what shocked fans was Leann's unapologetic approach. Instead of showing remorse, she flaunted the romance, often taunting Cibrian's ex-wife, Brandi Glanville, on social media. To many, this wasn't just poor judgment, it was cruelty. Her feud with Glanville became a years-long public circus. Leann's frequent Twitter spats, passive-aggressive comments, and tone-deaf posts gave the impression of someone who thrived on conflict rather than moving forward. Fans who once admired her voice began to see her as arrogant, attention-seeking, and insensitive. But her reputation wasn't only damaged by her personal life. Industry insiders have described her as difficult to work with, citing diva-like demands and a tendency to alienate those around her. Once the darling of Nashville, she gradually found herself pushed to the sidelines, not only because of shifting music trends, but also because of her behavior off the stage. Perhaps the most telling sign of her fall from grace is how her legacy is now viewed. Despite her incredible vocal talent and early achievements, her name often stirs up more memories of scandal than of music. For many, the brilliance of Blue has been overshadowed by years of arrogance, online feuds, and public drama. Leann Rimes could have been remembered as one of country's greats, a prodigy who fulfilled her promise. Instead, her arrogance and cruel behavior toward others cemented her place as one of the worst jerks in country music history. 6. Jason Aldean. Jason Aldean has long been celebrated as one of modern country's biggest stars, with massive hits like Dirt Road Anthem, She's Country, and Big Green Tractor, earning him sold-out tours and legions of fans. On the surface, Aldean embodied the image of the everyman cowboy, a small-town Georgia boy who rose to stardom through grit and talent. But behind the fame, his arrogance, controversial choices, and dismissive behavior have painted him as one of Nashville's most disliked figures. One of the biggest stains on Aldean's reputation came from his highly publicized cheating scandal. In 2012, he was photographed kissing another woman, former American Idol contestant Brittany Kerr, while still married to his wife of over a decade, Jessica Ussery. Instead of showing accountability, Aldean brushed off the incident at first, blaming alcohol and calling it a slip-up. But soon after, his marriage collapsed, and he went on to marry Kerr. Fans who once saw him as a family man felt betrayed, and many never forgave the hypocrisy. Aldean's attitude toward the media has also fueled his reputation as a jerk. Reporters have described him as cold and hostile, often giving short, dismissive answers in interviews. Rather than engaging with humility, he projects an air of entitlement, as though success has placed him above scrutiny. Even within the industry, whispers persist of Aldean being aloof and difficult to work with, prioritizing his ego over collaboration. His controversies didn't stop there. In 2023, Aldean released Try That in a Small Town, a song and video that drew enormous backlash for what many saw as racially charged undertones. While he defended the song as a celebration of small-town values, critics accused him of inflaming division and exploiting sensitive issues. Once again, Aldean doubled down instead of reflecting, leaning into defiance that alienated a large portion of the audience. Fans, too, have experienced his arrogance firsthand. Stories of Aldean being dismissive at meet and greets or acting like fans were a nuisance rather than the lifeblood of his career, only added fuel to the fire. His public persona of a laid-back, small-town guy often crumbles when faced with real interaction. Jason Aldean may continue to sell out arenas and dominate country radio, but his reputation is forever clouded. To many, he embodies the darker side of stardom: arrogance, entitlement, and disregard for the people who built his career. For that reason, he has earned his spot among the worst jerks in country music history. 7. Faith Hill. Faith Hill is often remembered as one of country music's brightest stars, with powerhouse ballads like Breathe, This Kiss, and There You'll Be, cementing her place as a crossover icon. Alongside her husband Tim McGraw, she has been part of one of Nashville's most famous power couples. To the public eye, Faith embodied elegance, talent, and charm. But behind the glamour, there have been countless stories of diva-like behavior and arrogance that turned her image from beloved superstar into one of the genre's most notorious jerks. Faith's most infamous moment came during the 2006 Country Music Association Awards. When Carrie Underwood's name was announced as Female Vocalist of the Year, cameras caught Faith throwing her arms up, mouthing, "What?" in apparent outrage before storming off camera. Though she later tried to brush it off as a joke, many fans and critics saw it as a raw glimpse of her arrogance and inability to accept younger talent stepping into the spotlight. The backlash was swift, with Faith's gracious public image suddenly tainted by what seemed like bitter jealousy. But that wasn't an isolated incident. Industry insiders have long whispered about Faith's demanding and difficult personality. Stories of her being dismissive to staff, journalists, and even fellow artists have circulated for years. Unlike her carefully polished stage presence, those who worked closely with her often described her as cold and self-centered, with little patience for anyone who challenged her status. Her fans have occasionally seen glimpses of this side too. Meet and greets that should have been warm encounters sometimes turned icy, with Faith reportedly rushing through autographs or showing little genuine interest in the people who idolized her. For an artist whose career was built on millions of loyal supporters, that behavior left many feeling disillusioned. Even within her high-profile marriage to Tim McGraw, rumors have surfaced of controlling tendencies and public spats. While the couple often portrayed a united front, moments of tension in interviews and on stage suggested a less harmonious dynamic behind the scenes. Faith Hill remains one of country's most successful female artists, with a legacy of hit songs and awards. But for many, her arrogance and flashes of disrespect cannot be overlooked. Instead of being remembered solely for her voice and contributions, she is also remembered for the diva behavior that placed her squarely on the list of country music's worst jerks. Merl Haggard. Merl Haggard is rightly celebrated as a country music legend, with timeless classics like Okie from Muskogee, Mama Tried, and Sing Me Back Home. His life story, from prison time at San Quentin to becoming one of the most influential voices in the genre, is the kind of redemption arc that made fans adore him. Yet behind the legend, Merl's personal behavior often reflected arrogance, cruelty, and a tendency to alienate the very people who helped him rise to fame. For many, his legacy as a songwriter is undeniable, but his reputation as a jerk is equally unforgettable. Merl's arrogance was visible early in his career. Having survived a turbulent youth and hard prison years, he carried himself with an air of superiority, as though his past struggles gave him the right to belittle others. Industry insiders often described him as unpredictable and temperamental, quick to snap at collaborators and dismissive of anyone he felt wasn't on his level. What others might call outlaw honesty often came across as rudeness and cruelty. His relationships were notoriously stormy. Married 5 times, Haggard's personal life was a revolving door of bitterness, accusations, and infidelity. He was often accused of treating women in his life poorly, with stories of neglect and selfishness overshadowing any image of romance in his music. For an artist who wrote deeply about love and heartbreak, his real-life actions often revealed a much colder, more arrogant man. Haggard also stirred controversy with his views and public comments. Oki from Muskogee, though beloved by many, was criticized as a smug, condescending anthem that mocked younger generations and their counterculture values. While some fans cheered the defiance, others saw it as an unnecessary attack that cemented Merl's image as a judgmental, self-righteous figure who used his music to sneer at those who didn't share his worldview. On stage, he could be brilliant, but he was also known for volatile moods, sometimes delivering lackluster performances, other times ranting at audiences or critics. Fans who came to celebrate the music sometimes left shaking their heads at the arrogance on display. Merl Haggard's musical contributions remain a cornerstone of country history, but his legacy is complicated. To many, he was not just the poet of the common man, but also a bitter, arrogant figure who treated people poorly and reveled in his own superiority. That duality secures his place on the list of the worst jerks in country music history. 9. Wanana Jud. As one half of the Judds, Wanana Jud helped shape the sound of country music in the 1980s and early 90s. With her powerhouse voice and undeniable stage presence, she, alongside her mother Naomi, became a household name. Later, she pursued a successful solo career, earning multiple #1 hits and cementing herself as one of the genre's most respected vocalists. But behind her iconic voice lies a reputation clouded by arrogance, feuds, and cold behavior that left fans and industry peers calling her one of country's worst jerks. Wanana's strained relationship with her mother Naomi and sister Ashley Judd was often splashed across headlines. Though family conflict is nothing new in show business, Wanana's blunt, often cutting remarks about her relatives created the impression of bitterness and jealousy rather than love. Instead of protecting family privacy, she repeatedly aired grievances publicly, reinforcing an image of someone who thrived on conflict rather than reconciliation. Her treatment of fans has also been widely criticized. Numerous accounts from meet and greets describe Wanana as distant, dismissive, and even rude, with little patience for the people who adored her music. Some supporters walked away disillusioned, realizing that the warmth in her songs did not always extend to her real-life interactions. Wanana's legal and personal troubles further damaged her reputation. Arrested in 2003 for driving under the influence, she later faced accusations of entitlement and arrogance in handling the fallout. Instead of taking full responsibility, she often projected an air of defiance, as though the rules that applied to everyone else didn't apply to her. Even within the music industry, Wanana earned a reputation as difficult to work with. Fellow artists and insiders described her as controlling and temperamental, someone who demanded the spotlight and was unwilling to compromise. Her diva-like behavior clashed with Nashville's collaborative spirit, making her one of the more polarizing figures in the genre. While Wanana Jud's vocal talent is undeniable, her arrogance and attitude have tainted her legacy. For many fans, it's hard to reconcile the heartfelt emotion in her songs with the dismissiveness and hostility that often surfaced offstage. Wanana could have been remembered solely as one of country's greatest voices, but her reputation as a jerk ensures she'll also be remembered for all the wrong reasons. Tanya Tucker. Tanya Tucker burst onto the country scene as a teenager in the 1970s with her smash hit Delta Dawn. She was hailed as a prodigy, and over the decades she built a career full of chart toppers, awards, and a reputation as one of country's most fearless female voices. But as much as fans admired her music, Tanya also became known for her arrogance, wild behavior, and attitude that often rubbed people the wrong way. From early on, Tucker embraced the bad girl persona, living a lifestyle of partying, rebellion, and controversy. While it set her apart, it also fueled her reputation as someone difficult to work with. Producers, managers, and band members often complained about her fiery temper and diva-like demands. Rather than collaborating, Tanya was known to insist on control, sometimes alienating those closest to her. Her relationships added more fuel to her image. High-profile romances with Glenn Campbell and others were filled with drama and public fights, and Tanya never hesitated to air grievances in interviews. Her blunt honesty, while refreshing to some, came across as arrogant and mean-spirited to many others. Even fans who adored her music sometimes felt her sting, Reports of cold or dismissive encounters at meet and greets painted her as ungrateful toward the very people who made her career possible. Instead of humility, Tanya often doubled down on her rebellious persona, reinforcing the idea that she thrived on conflict and controversy. While her music remains iconic, Tanya Tucker's arrogance and abrasive behavior placed her firmly on the list of country music's worst jerks. For many, her voice will always be legendary, but her attitude left plenty to regret. Gretchen Wilson. Gretchen Wilson stormed onto the country scene in 2004 with her breakout anthem, Redneck Woman, which became a cultural phenomenon and won her a Grammy. At first, she was celebrated as the unapologetic voice of working-class country, someone who brought grit and fire back into Nashville. But just as quickly as she rose to fame, Wilson's reputation began to suffer due to her volatile temper and arrogant behavior. Behind the scenes, Gretchen became infamous for being difficult to work with. Industry insiders described her as combative, demanding, and unwilling to compromise. Instead of nurturing her sudden success, she often clashed with record executives, producers, and even fellow musicians. Her problems extended to fans as well. Reports circulated of her being dismissive during meet and greets, leaving some supporters feeling disrespected by the very star they idolized. The final blow to her image came in 2018 when she was arrested after a disruptive incident on a commercial flight, where she reportedly became belligerent with staff and fellow passengers. While her early songs still resonate, Gretchen's arrogance and combative attitude have overshadowed her talent. For many, she became less of a redneck woman to cheer for and more of a cautionary tale of how attitude can ruin a career. 12. David Allan Coe. David Allan Coe has always been one of country music's most controversial figures. Known for songs like You Never Even Called Me By My Name, he branded himself as an outlaw who lived by his own rules. But his legacy is marred by arrogance, offensive behavior, and shocking controversies that cement him as one of the worst jerks in country music history. Coe often boasted about his prison time and hard-living lifestyle, but instead of using it as redemption, he leaned into arrogance, portraying himself as tougher and better than everyone else. His live shows became infamous for vulgar rants, crude behavior, and blatant disrespect toward audiences. The most damaging stain came from his underground albums filled with racist, misogynistic, and explicit content. While not officially part of his mainstream discography, the recordings destroyed much of his credibility and revealed a darker, uglier side. Even among the outlaw movement, Coe was seen as too extreme, too arrogant, and too offensive. Fans and peers alike grew tired of his antics, with many distancing themselves from his legacy. While Coe undeniably influenced country's rebel image, his behavior ensured he'd be remembered less as a pioneer and more as a pariah. His arrogance and cruelty left scars that no amount of music can erase.